What is going on, New York Giant fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Big Blue in the Bronx podcast. I hope you guys are doing well. Hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or a video drops. Appreciate y'all coming back. Share this out. Do all the good stuff. Share out on podcast platforms. Hope you guys are keeping that blood pressure down with the way the New York Football Giants are playing. But if you're a fan who is not like me and wants to see wins, right? I have to keep it objective on this show because, if I was to talk about my fandom and how I want them to lose, it would not be objective and it would be less attractive for you guys, the viewer. But the New York Giants, for the first time in a number of weeks, have a winnable game in front of them. Now, they could have won against Washington, of course. That didn't happen. But this is an opponent that I think is actually legitimately worse than they are. Now, besides that, there's also the fact that the Giants are playing overseas and they've never lost overseas. They're playing at Allianz Arena in Germany, in Munich. They played in London 2 years ago with Daniel Jones against the Green Bay Packers. They ended up winning that game, and then a couple of years earlier, I think it was 6 years earlier, they ended up winning against the Rams in I forget what stadium was it. I don't know if it was Wembley or Tottenham Hotspur, but nonetheless, the New York Giants have a winnable game on the schedule right here. And before we go into injury report and all that other stuff, this is, in my opinion, an important game for Brian Daboll and the locker room. I think well inside, they know that this is a bereft of talent team. Right? This is a bereft of talent team. And the Giants have more talent, but the Giants also have... both teams are 2-7, so the production is pretty much the same. But you have to see through unfiltered glass lenses that the Giants are the better football team in a mud race, in an absolute mud race. So we know that, the locker room knows that. But if you lose this game, staying on an objective playing field, if you lose this game, in any way, shape, or form, you get your ass beat, you lose by a missed field goal, you lose by this, you lose by that, whatever, I'm going to have to predict that Brian Daboll's job starts to heat up, and maybe you'll see a benching of Daniel Jones after the bye week. Now, that could happen. It could also be after playoff elimination, but this is a game where not only is your opponent worse than you, this is also a game where it's overseas. The NFL's trying to market to the Germans and all these people that live there. So it's going to eventually come back to John Mara, and he knows the season, or at least I hope he knows that the season is absolutely gone at this point. But you don't want to lose to a lowly Panthers team who had no expectations coming into the year, compared to the New York Giants, to where they did have expectations coming into the year with the drafting of Malik Neighbors and this, that, and the other thing. Me, I didn't have that many expectations, but it is what it is. So let's move to the injury report. We'll start with the New York Football Giants, and it's weird, right? The Giants are always technically the away team when they go overseas. I think it was that way against the Rams. I think it was that way against the Dolphins in 2007. It was also that way against the the Green Bay Packers in 2022. So, all right, New York Giants. Darius Slayton, concussion protocol. He is out. He did not make the trip over to Germany with the team, so they'll probably elevate Isaiah Hodgins or any of the other receivers the Giants have on the practice squad. Also, as well, Bryce Ford Wheaton, who's been dealing with some injuries on and off. Achilles injury. He did not practice all week, did not make the trip with the team. He is out for the game. Kicker Graham Gano is questionable with the hamstring injury. He is expected to return this week. They cut Matt Hack. I would presume that they'll cut Makatomney. Though I don't think it's happened officially yet. Jamie Gillen looks good to go. They cut Matt Hack, so he is done. As far as the questionable side, two not really concerning because they don't really do much. Matt Adams, the linebacker, he is questionable. He's more of a special teamer. The linebacker, Darius Musow, he is also questionable. And safety, Jason Pinnock, he is questionable. Did not practice on Friday. Thursday he did. It was limited, though. with an abdomen injury. So you hope that doesn't creep up. The Giants don't really have great safety depth. It would be Dane Belton and Tyler Nubin and Anthony Johnson if Jason Pinnock was to miss this game. So you go to the other side of the ball, to the Carolina Panthers, and you have a number of guys questionable, doubtful, and out. So Jadeveon Clowney is questionable with a knee injury. He's expected to play. Ika Mekwonu, the left tackle, he is out with an ankle injury. Adam Thielen is on IR. He is out with a hamstring injury. Rookie Jamie Robinson, he is doubtful. Actually, Robinson was a rookie last year, so my bad on that. He was a rookie out of Florida State. Knee injury, he is doubtful. Jonathan Brooks, the rookie running back out of Texas, who had that horrible injury in his final year, I think it was midway last year. He is questionable. I don't know if he'll play, though. Obviously, in the second half of our show, Matt Alkiza gives his thoughts on whether Jonathan Brooks will play or not. Jordan Fuller, he is questionable with the hamstring. He practiced all week, though. Tommy Tremble is questionable with a back injury. He did practice in some capacity pretty much the entire week. He was limited on Thursday and full on Wednesday, Friday. DJ Wanham, the former Vikings linebacker, quad injury. He is questionable, but he should be good to go. And cornerback Lonnie Johnson, he is questionable, should be good to go because he had a limited practice, and a full practice. So there's that. Okay, so we get to the comparisons of the rankings, which is not going to be pretty by any means, so close your eyes, close your ears, whatever. The Giants ranked 26th in total yards per game, 23rd in a passing offense, 19th in rushing offense, and 32nd in points per game. Defensively, they rank 18th in total yards, 9th against the pass, 28th against the run, and 15th in points per game. They are So going to the analytics side of the ball, the Giants, in terms of passing play percentage, they rank 10th. In rushing play percentage, they rank 23rd. In passing first down percentage this season, they rank 15th. And rushing first down percentage, the Giants also rank 15th, so they're in the middle there. You move to the defensive side of the ball, 10th in blitz percentage, that's the Panthers. They rank 12th in blitz percentage, 17th in pressure percentage, and first in the NFL in sacks, even though they did not record a single sack last week by anyone on that defensive line, which is kind of bad. Well, it's not kind of bad, it is bad. So you move to the Panthers side of the ball, it's not good either. 30th in total yards, 30th in passing offense, 25th in rushing offense, and 29th as a scoring offense. Defensively, 32nd in total yards, 32nd against the run, 32nd in points per game, and 25th in passing yards per game. In terms of the analytical side of the football and passing play percentage, Carolina, where do they rank? Let's see. They rank 8th in pass play percentage. They rank 25th in rush play percentage. In the passing on first down percentage, they rank 13th, and they also rank 21st in rushing first down percentage. And as far as defensively, 10th in blitz percentage, 32nd in pressure percentage, and 30th in sacks. So let's go to things to look for, right? So let's start out with the Giants defense and the Carolina offense. Protecting the quarterback, right? Protecting the quarterback for Carolina and pressure blitz from the Giants. Surprisingly, to a lot of people who are on the outside looking in, they don't know the Carolina Panthers as well, they have a good offensive line. Now, I don't know if they're the strongest run blocking unit, but pass blocking, they've been one of the best in the NFL. Their quarterbacks have taken 17 sacks this season, and even then, right, you can't even just say, oh, well, it's all on the offensive line. Sometimes it's on the quarterback, too. Bryce Young is a smaller quarterback. Andy Dalton's a veteran quarterback, so you kind of have to question through the film, okay, was a sack on him, was a sack not on him, whatever. But they have a pretty good offensive line. There's going to be some substitutions this week, which is where the Giants do have a vulnerability matchup, which is in favor for them. And again, though they have this decent offensive line, you do expect some matchups still to be won. Azeez Ojulari going against either Taylor Moton. I mean, Moton's a solid tackle. I think he's underrated. Or Brady Christensen, who's going to be playing the left tackle side, the former third-round pick out of BYU. Or it's going to be Brian Burns on either side. It could be Burns versus Moton or Burns versus Christensen. And you know Brian Burns is going to be playing with a couple steps more of motivation because he was a Carolina Panther. He was traded from them, so there's that. And I think that Shane Bowen's path to success in this game could definitely be rushing the passer like he did, not too crazy, but like he did in a similar way against the Cleveland Browns, because that was a decent offensive line, but it was like slowly deteriorating, and Watson just couldn't find his way. He ran into a lot of sacks, and Bryce Young, again, he's a shorter quarterback, and I hate using that, but he's not like Kyler Murray where he's gonna dance around and he's gonna move around and avoid the sack. No, Bryce Young is a little bit more of a pocket quarterback, smaller type, so you could probably take advantage of that, and I would expect the Giants to take advantage of that, at least on the defensive side of the ball. They really don't have anybody that scares you. For some reason, they only have 3 wide receivers and I think 5 tight ends if you look at their roster. So I'm going to look at their roster right now. Jatavian Sanders is one of their tight ends. Tommy Tremble is one of their tight ends. And then they got 3 more after that. It's a pretty stacked list. Ian Thomas, who's been there for years. Felipe Franks, who's the former quarterback from Florida. And Jordan Matthews, who's also a converted tight end, former wide receiver. And then as for the regular wide receivers, you got David Moore, Xavier Legette. Moore's a vet, Legette's a rookie, and Jalen Coker, who's also a rookie. He's an undrafted free agent out of Holy Cross. And then in the backfield, you got Jonathan Brooks, who's activated, but who knows if he'll actually be active. Raheem Blackshear, who's a special teamer. Chuba Hubbard, who just got extended. And Miles Sanders, the former Philadelphia Eagle. So their offense, again, outside of the offensive line, which seems to be the best unit on the offensive side of the football, really does not scare you. And the Giants should really, to be completely honest with you, have no problems. If Deonte Banks loses his battles against Xavier Legette or any of these guys in the wide receiver room, it's really time to hit that fucking panic button. So you look at the Giants' offense against this defense, and there's multiple favorable opportunities for the New York Football Giants, again, as it was on the defensive side of the ball. You got lazy/bad linebacker play. They're not good versus the run. Versus the pass, they bite on play action. So the Giants, I could bet you, will probably be running the football, and they'll be, doing some play action out of that. So Josie Jewell and Trayvon Wallace, the rookie from Kentucky, will probably be getting some very good tests. As far as the Giants' offensive game plan, I don't think they're going to go all out. Oh yeah, we're going to score 30 points. We're going to do this. They're probably going to keep it as compromised of a playbook as you could make it. Sad to say, but that's what the Giants' offense is. That's what Brian Dable has turned this offense into, and of course Daniel Jones. But this should be a relatively decent game for the offense, and I'm holding it at decent. I'm not holding it at good. I'm not holding it at great, but I'm saying decent because we know what this offense is capable of in the wrong ways possible. Now, again, the Giants could pound the rock with Tyrone Tracy. This is a team that's 32nd in the NFL in stopping the run. As I mentioned, their run defense, not very good. Linebackers, not very good. This could be a game where you take advantage, and maybe Theo Johnson, because of the bad linebacker play, because they're bad in coverage, you start to take advantage of that. And their secondary really isn't great. Like, it's decent for what it is, but it's not, great. Shamar Bartholomew is probably not going to be active, but if he was, he's a special teamer. J.C. Horn, he's a good corner. Dane Jackson, decent. Mike Jackson, decent. Lonnie Johnson Jr., decent, but you notice the recurring theme is that these guys have been around the league, and then you also have Chow Smith-Wade, the rookie, and then you look at the safety room. It's Xavier Woods, Robinson is out, Damani Richardson's led them in tackles for the last few weeks, and you also have Sam Franklin. So, it's not a very experienced secondary as, okay, these guys have played together, this, and this. These guys, truly enough, it's been, 9 weeks into the season? So, but these guys have played at all sorts of different avenues. This is not some team that has like a major amount of continuity. So, I would expect maybe Theo Johnson. If you're not getting the ball to Malik Neighbors, which you really should, get it to Theo Johnson because Theo Johnson has gotten the ball the last few weeks. I know he had some dropsies last week, but there's no reason not to go back to him. So that's as far as that goes. Now the players to watch, right? We got Bryce Young on the season. He's got 3 touchdowns, 6 INTs, 10 sacks taken, 57 yards lost on those sacks, 5.4 yards per throw. That's not good. And 115.7 yards per game. That's not good. 60.2 completion percentage. Not great. So you see where the deficiencies are in his quarterback play. Now, he's played better of the last few weeks. He's had some almost interceptions, but as Matt will talk about in the second half, he's played better. He played significantly better against the New Orleans Saints. So there's that. In terms of the rushing game, Chuba Hubbard leads them with 665 yards, 5 touchdowns, 3 big plays over 20, 5 yards per carry, which is pretty good. Miles Sanders, 134 yards on the season, 36 carries, 3.7 yards per carry, 1 touchdown, 1 play over 20, which I don't know. It isn't great, right? Miles Sanders was signed to, I think it was a 2-3 year contract, and I think he was signed between $7 and $9 million a year. So you're not really getting the best value. And Bryce Young is also in the rushing category, so they really don't make a conceited effort. I don't know what it's either conceited or concerted effort, whatever. They don't make a real effort to pound the rock. They don't. It's mostly through the passing game, and it's not like either of those have been efficient. So you look at the offensive side of the ball, and 2 of these guys who are in the top leaders of receiving, at least within the top 5 on their team, are no longer on the team anymore. Deontay Johnson was traded to the Baltimore Ravens, and Jonathan Mingo was traded to the Cowboys. So Jatavian Sanders has no touchdowns as of yet this year. He's got 4 big plays over 20, 245 yards on 24 catches. You got Xavier Legette, who's got 4 touchdowns, 3 big plays over 20. He's got 244 yards, 9.4 yards per catch, and 26 catches. Jalen Coker, who's got 1 touchdown and 3 big plays over 20, 222 yards and 14 receptions. And that's pretty much that. And then Chuba Hubbard has a touchdown out of the backfield, 108 yards on 26 catches, which is 4.2 yards per catch. Not great. I'm going to skip Akuma Kwanu because he's out this week. Look at the offensive line and their stats. Brady Christensen's better as a run blocker, and I couldn't get the full PFF statistics. But 3 penalties, no sacks given up this year. Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt, those guys, they invested really expensive. They how do I put this in English? They put a lot of assets into them, right? Damian Lewis, free agent from Seattle. Robert Hunt, free agent from Miami, who they paid $20 million a year just to get him. So 2 penalties, 2 sacks for Lewis. Cade Mays, who was actually on the Giants practice squad this year. So he was originally, I believe, a draft pick of the Panthers. He was cut. Then the Patriots had him. Then the Giants had him. And a couple other teams had him. And then he's now back with the team that drafted him. So he's got 0 penalties, 0 sacks. Robert Hunt, 2 penalties, 3 sacks. And Taylor Moton, 1 penalties and 0 sacks. So as far as their pass rush goes, I really didn't mention this in things to look for. It's really not scary. It's not. They have 10 sacks in 9 games. Jadeveon Clowney, I don't know if this has been a consistent career problem of his, but he can never finish. Can never, at least in this season, in this time frame, 9 games, he hasn't been able to finish. He hasn't been able to sack the quarterback. I mean, he's got 2 quarterback hits, 7 QB pressures, 3 TFLs, 1 sack, and 23 tackles. But I think there's 1-2 guys on the team that have more sacks than he does. He's not able to finish. So if Daniel Jones can be this guy that's a little slippery, I mean, he's not Lamar Jackson, but a little slippery, break some tackles, like he did last week on the goal line with the Washington Commanders, then there's a path to success right there. As far as Charles Harris, he is the former, I think he was with Detroit for a little bit, and I think he was in Atlanta too. 20 tackles on the season, 3 sacks, 4 TFLs, 7 quarterback pressures, and 6 quarterback hits. So he is their leading pass rusher. Again, that doesn't really say much. And also their second leading sacker is a guy by the name of Ashawn Robinson, who everybody should be familiar with. Prominent run stopper, 2 sacks, 2 TFLs, 38 tackles on the season, and 1 pass defended. Josie Jewell and Traven Wallace. Jewell hasn't been great in coverage this year. 100 passer rating, one touchdown allowed, 68.2 completion percentage allowed, 9.1 yards per completion allowed, and 137 yards, and a total of 46 tackles. So you move to Traven Wallace, the rookie. He's allowed 100% completion percentage, one touchdown, 13 yards per completion, 182 yards, and a 142.6 passer rating. Not good. So you get to the secondary, where it gets at least a little bit better. You got J.C. Horn, who's got 9 pass deflections, 43.6 completion percentage, an interception on the year, 259 yards, 4 touchdowns allowed, and 89.6 passer rating, 36 tackles. This is a guy who struggles to stay healthy, but when he plays, he's pretty damn good. Mike Jackson, who came over from Seattle and has been a number of places over the course of his career, 65 completion percentage, 1 interception, 4 touchdowns allowed, 104.7 passer rating. So the linebacker core is much worse than the secondary, which means the middle of the field will be open. Theo Johnson, Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm not even going to say Jalen Hyatt because he's not going to get the ball. Those guys, you got to target them. You got to target them, and that's really how you're going to get your offensive success. So keys to win, right? I've been thinking about this. Keys to win. You got to blow out their. Well, you got to get a turnover, right? I don't remember if they got a turnover last game. I don't think they did. So I'm gonna add turnover as that key number 2, right? I'm gonna have it as the key number 2. You need a good day for Daniel Jones. That's number 1, right? You need a good day for Daniel Jones. I don't think they're the worst passing defense in all of football, but that middle of the field is going to be open. You got to get it to your tight end, Theo Johnson. You got to get it to Malik Neighbors. You got to give your rushing game a chance. And of course, they have the worst rushing defense in the NFL, but we've seen it before where, oh, this team's a bad rushing defense. And then they come in and have a career game against the Giants or a season game against the Giants. So good day for Daniel Jones, turnover, and it's got to be something defensive here. I would say get to the passer, right? You're going to rattle Bryce Young a little bit. They do have a good offensive line. Get to the passer, right? Again, decent offensive line, but if Bryce Young can get in his own way with the pressure coming down on him, kind of like Deshaun Watson in Week 3, that's a winning plan. So good day for Jones, turnovers, and getting to the passer. So I didn't give a prediction the last time out against the Commanders, which was a mistake of mine, so I apologize. I would have had that game going the way it did anyway in terms of the result. I thought the Giants would have lost, so they ended up doing that. And I have the Giants winning this week. I have the Giants winning a game this week for the first time in a number of weeks since the beginning of October. Let's go with 1914. Giants win 1914 overseas in Alliance Stadium. Let's turn our attention to the discussion with Matt Alkiza of Sports Illustrated. Alrighty then. So now in the second half of our show, we have Matt coming on. He is the deputy editor for the Carolina Panthers on Sports Illustrated, and for a team that has the same record as us, I believe at 2-7 after a win last week against the New Orleans Saints, who fired their head coach Dennis Allen much afterward. What is the culture looking like in the first year of Dave Canales and Dan Morgan?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me on, Alex. Happy to be here, talk a little Panthers, Giants. It's been weird. It feels like everything around the Carolina Panthers franchise has been in flux, and I mean, it starts with the quarterback position, right? You guys are probably feeling the same thing with Daniel Jones. It's hard for you guys to evaluate Brian Dable. Joe Shane has his own problems that can be discussed at a later date. But yeah, it's hard to really know and understand and see Canales and Morgan's vision when there's just been so much uncertainty at the quarterback position. I will say a lot of the moves that Morgan made this offseason, a lot of the draft picks, some undrafted free agents, seem like they've hit and they're playing really well. I mean, the Panthers are being led in receiving by 3 rookies, 2 receivers, and a tight end. Their leading tackler the last 2 weeks is an undrafted rookie playing safety. So it feels like the culture is moving in the right direction. It's hard to see it with the uncertainty and everything going on at the quarterback position right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of, again, a little bit of the same way over here, but it just feels like I'm getting really tired of the Giants just sticking to Daniel Jones and not pulling the plug. We might see a change. Who knows? after this week and after the bye week as well. We'll get into the quarterback talk in just a minute, but of course, I'm going to ask this about both coordinators. How has Brad Idzik called the offense? Do you think he's done a good job considering the QB? Is it like the same position as you said, Dave Canales, when there's a limitation at quarterback?
Yeah, so Canales is actually the play caller. Idzik and him work together, but Canales calls the plays on game day. Um, I don't have a huge problem with the play calling. I think, again, they know what they're working with. They opened up the playbook a little bit when Dalton stepped in Vegas and against Cincinnati, and there was a lot more downfield passing. The number of passing attempts went up when Dalton got into the game, but these last 2 weeks, since Bryce has come back into the starting lineup, it kind of feels like a blend of what how Canales called the offense the first 2 weeks. It was all underneath throws. Bryce was, I don't know if he was afraid to throw the ball downfield or there's a mandate for him not to throw the ball downfield. I don't know what the whole deal with that was. But these past 2 weeks since Bryce has come back from being benched because Andy Dalton hurt his thumb, kind of feels like they have reached a middle ground from the high flying offense that Andy Dalton led really in his first 2 games, again against Vegas and Cincinnati, and what the offense looked like at the beginning of the season. So I don't have a problem with it. There are a lot of Panthers fans that have complained about kind of some of the conservative play calls, some screens on 3rd and long, some draws on 2nd and long, not a lot of downfield throws until here recently with Bryce. So yeah, I mean, I understand the limitations they're working with, so I can definitely see from their perspective why they're a little bit more conservative. But yeah, the fan base as a whole does have some complaints. Personally, I think he's doing a fine job.
Yeah, of course. So we get into the quarterback position. Bryce Young, obviously last year drafted under the Reich regime. Reich gets fired. Reports about how Reich really didn't want Bryce Young. It was more of David Tepper wanting him and that whole mess. He comes into his second year. First few games are off. He gets benched for Andy Dalton. Comes back in the last few games. What is your assessment of Bryce Young to this point in his NFL career?
Yeah, the first, what, 17, 18 games he started before he was benched, the flashes just weren't there. I mean, he has happy feet in the pocket, and that kind of goes back to college, but you can get away with bad footwork in college because the players aren't as talented on either side of the ball. But everything was bad. He was out of rhythm. He couldn't like hit contested throws. He was not pushing the ball downfield. But I will say these past 2 weeks, he's looked a lot more like the quarterback that I think the Panthers thought they were drafting at number 1 overall last year, specifically last week against the Saints. Young hit a couple of big time throws, and his stat line, I think it was like 17 of 25, 175 yards, touchdown, interception. That is not great on the surface. That's not going to win anybody a fantasy matchup if you have Bryce Young in your quarterback position for whatever reason. But there were 2 throws. One was just an outright drop by David Moore that would have been a 40-yard touchdown that Bryce dropped in a bucket. And then another, his interception was just off the hands of Xavier Legette right into the arms of a Saints defensive back. If those 2 plays go the way they should have, Young's day looks significantly better. 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, 20 completions. He was legitimately very impressive last week. It was by far the best game of his career, and I have not been excited to watch Bryce Young play football on a Sunday for the last year and a half because of how much he's struggled. I'm looking forward to seeing how he plays against the Giants this week to see if he can build on his impressive performance from last week against New Orleans.
Now, obviously, there's two different avenues or possible avenues, in my opinion, that the Carolina Panthers, from an outsider's perspective, can take. Um, at what point would you get the feeling that Dave Canales would keep Bryce Young for another year? And at what point would you get the feeling that they're going to say, okay, we're done with Bryce Young. We're just going to take it into next year and either sign a quarterback or maybe more likely draft a quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to all come down to these next 8 games. I think if Young goes back to the bench at some point and they replace him as with Andy Dalton as the starter, I don't think Bryce Young will be back under center next year. If Bryce continues to improve like we saw last week against New Orleans, he can kind of carry that performance into the next 8 weeks to the second half of the season. I think there's a decent chance that he's back again next year. So I think they're still in this big evaluation phase. They're kind of evaluating the entire roster. They have a lot of young guys on both sides of the ball, defense and offense. So I think it's just a constant evaluation process of Young. If he continues to improve and play well, again, like he did last week, I mean, there's a real shot he's playing quarterback in Carolina next September. If he reverts back to the quarterback that we saw the first 18 games of his career, there's no chance he's back next year. Looking at a quarterback at the top of the draft, trying to trade for somebody. I mean, I don't know what all the options are going forward. But yeah, I mean, it's really at this point, I think a true 50-50. If you had asked me last week, I would say it was 60-40 in favor of him not playing quarterback in Carolina next year. But the flashes he showed last week are enough for me to buy in for another week, and we'll see how he plays in Germany.
Yeah, of course. So, before we move to some of the other positions, one of the highly touted picks, but of course he wasn't going to see the field right away, and to my knowledge, he has it. Has the I would say rehab development of Jonathan Brooks coming along?
Yeah, so he's officially activated off IR. He is eligible to play for the first time on Sunday. I don't think he does. I think he is inactive this game. They have their bye week, and then he comes back following the bye for his first actual NFL action. So he's is available to play on Sunday off the IR, but I don't think we see him until after the bye.
Of course. And I was looking at the roster right before I was forming these questions, and I'm like, that's a little odd. Three wide receivers. I think it's like five tight ends you guys have. Do you know what the philosophy is behind that, or any of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, all the way back to the preseason, Dave Canales has said that the tight ends are going to be really important for his offensive philosophy. Both the top two tight ends in the depth chart went down in the end of July, early August, so it kind of became a talking point all summer of how is Canales going to function his offense in the preseason without a tight end on the roster. All that was left was the rookie Jatavian Sanders, and they signed Jordan Matthews, who is now back on the active roster after being on the practice squad. So yeah, I mean, I don't think this is was his intention at all to only have, I think, what, three or four healthy receivers going into a game and more tight ends than that. I mean, that's not any coach's philosophy or plan really, but Canales does rely heavily on the tight ends in both the run game and the pass game. We saw in the pass game specifically Jatavian Sanders' breakout game against New Orleans. So another young guy, another rookie who flashed last week, and I'm excited to see how he plays again on Sunday.
Yeah, of course. And this offseason for the Panthers, they signed two marquee guard free agents. Of course, they put a crap ton of money in Robert Hunt. They signed Damian Lewis, who came over from Seattle. You got Ika Makwana, who they drafted a couple of years ago. How has this O line played, considering the amount of investments that over the years, and especially this year too, that the Panthers have put in it?
Yeah, I mean, they've been fantastic. It's been the by far the best position group on the team, and at times has played like a top five offensive line in football. That's what made the whole Bryce Young conversation so frustrating the first 2 weeks of the season because he kept bailing out of these clean pockets. He kept rolling away from pressure that wasn't actually coming because the Panthers' front five has been really good every game. They've had to sub out players a lot. Starting center Austin Corbett lost for the year. Ike Ekwonu didn't play last week. Brady Christensen sliding in at left tackle. He's also played center. Chandler Zavala is a guy they drafted last year who was super disappointing as a rookie, has come in and been serviceable in relief of Damian Lewis, who's missed a couple of games. Everybody they've put in, I think they've started 9 or 10 different offensive linemen so far this year. They've all been great. I mean, there has not been a single weak spot in the offensive line, even through attrition that you expect to see in an offensive line. It's the most physical position in sports, so you expect guys to get hurt. I mean, the Panthers too deep at offensive line. They've all been great, and it's truly been impressive how they went from being the worst unit in the league last year to what they are now. So credit to the talent they brought in, but also the coaching staff on the offensive line that came in with Dave Canales to really right the ship there.
Yeah, of course, and a lot of that also goes to the offensive line coach who they pulled from Tampa Bay and Joe Gilbert. But moving to the defensive side of the ball, in total stats, they're not great. But that's stats, obviously, and I'll get your thoughts on that. But Ejiro Rivero, obviously, he was one of the main pursued candidates over the last few years for a head coaching gig. Obviously, he stayed in Carolina. How has he done so far with this group of talent on defense?
Yeah, it's been very difficult to evaluate Avero and his scheme because there's been so much attrition on defense. They're down, I mean, off the top of my head, five or six starters from the original depth chart. And again, you expect attrition, but the level that the Panthers have faced has been, it's been, nearly impossible for him to make up for, right? Like you can only make up so much scheme when you're missing players like the Panthers are. So again, it's really hard to evaluate Avero. The thing that kind of frustrates me about him and why I think Carolina may move on from him in the offseason is that some of the guys that have disappointed are guys that he brought in specifically that he worked with in his other stops as a coach. So he brought in Troy Hill, who he worked with in LA. They won a Super Bowl. He's already been cut this year. Josie Jewell to play linebacker. He hasn't really flashed at all. So yeah, a handful of guys that came with Avero this offseason. Or I guess Avero's been here for a couple of years, but Carolina signed them this offseason. I'm assuming at Avero's recommendation have not played well. So that's my main knock on Avero is he brought in his guys. You know, he had a chance to spend some money this offseason, kind of retool the defense in his vision, and they've still been bad. It's kind of hard for me to stick with that for another year. So up and down. I mean, there's definitely been some good things, some bad things, but it's hard to evaluate because of the talent drain they've faced.
Yeah, of course. And moving to the pass rushing side of the ball, of course, there was the infamous March trade between the New York Football Giants and Carolina Panthers, where Brian Burns was given up for a 2 and a 5 between friends Joe Shane and Dan Morgan. I know Jadeveon Clowney is on that side of the football now. Is there a absence that has been there since Brian Burns has left, or has the defense been able to make up for that?
No, I mean you can't make up Brian Burns losing a guy like that, double digit sacks the last couple of years. I mean, really, like the only pass rusher the Panthers have had this decade. It feels like only consistent pass rusher at least. So yeah, they kind of want to replace his production by committee, and that committee has completely fallen apart. Coming into the season, Eku Leota was the only player that had a sack in Week 1 against the Saints. He was cut the next week. They've really just like been rotating guys on the edge. Charles Harris has kind of stepped in the last couple of weeks and played pretty well across from Jadeveon Clowney. But to answer your question, no, they have not in the slightest replicated what Brian Burns gave them on the edge the past couple of seasons. It has been quarterbacks have unbelievable amounts of time in the pocket when they're playing the Carolina Panthers because there is not a single pass rusher that opposing offenses fear.
Yeah, tough sledding there. Now, as far as the secondary goes, because I was going to ask a question about J.C. Horn, but it seems like, I mean, I saw Chow Smith Wade at the Senior Bowl. You guys got Bartholomew, who's a special teamer with the Jets, and a couple other pieces. But it looks like the corner room outside of J.C. Horn and of course Chow Smith Wade is like a bunch of guys picked off from other rosters. Dane Jackson, I remember he had a term, if you will, in Buffalo. Lonnie Johnson's been all over the place. So how has the secondary performed, being that the bunch of guys picked off of each other's rosters?
Yeah, I mean the secondary. I don't want to say it's been a strength because they've been picked apart, but J.C. Horn's been great. Him and Mike Jackson, the other starting corner, they did not allow a single catch to a receiver against the Saints last week. And I mean, if you can name more than two receivers on the Saints right now, you're a bit of a sicko or a really, really into like um, deep fantasy leagues after Chris Olave got hurt. But still, impressive to not allow a reception to a receiver across an entire NFL game. Those guys they're playing against are still getting paid to play professional football, so they've got some juice to them. So yeah, I mean they've been fine. J.C. Horn's been great. He gave up a huge touchdown against New Orleans in Week 1 on their first drive of the game, and that was kind of like the low point of his season. He's been great since then. He's on track to get paid this offseason. He kind of bet on himself. Um, yeah, he's a free agent and he is hoping to re up in Carolina. And I'm hoping that they re up him as well because he is the lockdown corner that they drafted him to be. It took a couple of seasons for him to kind of battle injuries and get to full health, but he's been great so far this season. And then the rest of the guys, Dane Jackson just came back from injury. He hurt his hamstring in the preseason, was on IR to start the season. Mike Jackson, they traded for really on right after roster cut down. And he's been the starting corner all season across from JC Horn. So yeah, they've pieced it together. Like you said, a couple of guys they just plucked off of practice squads or late summer trades or cheap free agent signings. they've been decent. I mean, it's been hard for them to compete um, for like plays at a time because the pass rush isn't getting home. They've had to do a lot of work in the secondary, but for the situation around them, they've been pretty good.
Let's see here. So moving further into game prep, two X factors, one on offense and one on defense for the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, X factor on offense is either I'll give you two: Xavier Leggett or Jatavian Sanders, either the rookie receiver or the rookie tight end. Those guys have really been forced into action with the trade of Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen going down, and they both performed really well. Sanders had his breakout game last week against the Saints, showed some really high level, not only like pass catching skills, but athleticism. I don't know if you saw him hurdle the Saints defender and rumble on the sidelines for a big gain early on in that game. So he's the kind of guy I think Bryce Young will target him early and often. He's become the number one pass catching tight end. So he's the X factor on the offensive side of the ball. And on defense, I think it's either going to be like you just talked about J.C. Horn or Mike Jackson, whichever one has the unfortunate assignment of covering Malik Neighbors all afternoon. Because Neighbors is an incredible wide receiver, and I think he's going to give the Panthers fits. So one of those two guys is going to have a long, I say afternoon, morning here on the East Coast covering Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, definitely, no doubt about that. And if you're somebody who's looking at the Giants and you're looking at X factors to potentially who could wreck a game or make the game very difficult, I know we just talked about Malik Neighbors, and he could obviously be one of them. One X factor for the Giants and one X factor for the Giants on offense, X factor for the Giants on defense.
Yeah, on offense, it's Tyrone Tracy. I'm sure you obviously I don't need to tell Giants fans how cool of a story he is playing receiver in college, turned to a running back last year. Now he leads all rookies in rushing. Really like a freak athlete, and the Panthers have struggled with slowing down opposing rushing games. The Giants' offensive line versus Panthers' defensive line is kind of a movable force meeting a stoppable object kind of deal. It's weakness on weakness. So I'm interested to see who comes out on top of that matchup. But I think Tyrone Tracy could go wild on Sunday. The Panthers have given up a ton of rushing yards all season, so he's the X factor on offense for the Giants. On defense, it's hard to say he's an X factor because he's been incredible. But I mean, Dexter Lawrence has the potential to wreck games. Carolina is going to be on their third center. Cade Mays started last week, played pretty well against the Saints. Seems like he's on track to start again with Ike Mekwanu not playing, and Brady Christensen is going to have to slide out to left tackle. So Dexter Lawrence is going to have a real good matchup against Cade Mays, and there's a chance that he's just going to wreck the game from the inside. So he's the guy that I'm watching on the Giants defense. Again, hard to call their best player an X factor, but the weak spot of the Carolina Panthers offensive line right now is center, and Dexter Lawrence should take advantage of that.
Yeah, of course. So, last thing, where can people find you, your work, and what you do?
Yep, yeah, you can find my work. I got my Twitter handle on the screen at MLKiza8. You can keep with me, Panthers on SI. If you're a basketball fan, Hornets on SI as well. Just covering both professional sports teams in Charlotte for Sports Illustrated.
Course. So feel free, everybody, please check out Matt, his work on Sports Illustrated. Follow him on X at Matt Alkiza or MLkiza at 8. Appreciate Matt coming on and talking some Giants Panthers as we go in for a pretty interesting matchup in some of the wrong way possible, because obviously these teams are both 2-7. Not where obviously we want to be, but nonetheless, I appreciate him taking the time. As for this channel, like, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops up your drops. I appreciate you guys coming back, and we'll see you on Tuesday for a recap.